Alright, new player's guide to Order of the Dragon part 2. So if you haven't seen part 1, you might want to do so first. That's a how-to of the build order. In this video, we're going to do the same build order, but in first person and sort of explain it as we go. Mainly talking about what we're trying to achieve and why. Some of the things to focus on with the build and Order of the Dragon. And also some things for learning Age of Empires 4 more generally. Some of the fundamental stuff like macro, unit control, decision making, that kind of thing. So with that said, let's jump in. We're going to queue up villager, put our villagers onto sheep, and then send our scouts away. The starting build for this, for Order of the Dragon, is so simple. We're just going to take our first 2 villagers onto gold, and then we're going to rally back to food until we age up. Couldn't be simpler. So our first villager that comes out, we're going to build a house and then a mining camp. So to do that, we're going to go QQ, left click, QR, shift left click, and that's it. They know once the AI knows that once they've done making the mining camp, they want to mine the closest resource. In this case, that's gold. So we're away laughing. And then the second build that comes out is going to help finish off the mining camp, and then they also will go to gold. Now we rally back to food, and that's it until we age up. So while we're waiting to age up, I want to talk a little bit about Order of the Dragon generally. So they are a very basic civ and a decent civ for new players. They kind of get memed on when they came out as being the low cognitive load civ, or being so straightforward and easy that you don't have to think about them. It's somewhat true, but they do have some difficulties or some traps with the way that they work, which makes them quite difficult to play, and I think especially for newer players. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend them for a brand new player, though they are fine. You just have to sort of learn or get used to their sort of unique aspects, which can make them difficult to play. There's kind of 3 things I think, or 3 sort of like pitfalls or traps with them. The first one is just the very nature of them having the units being double the strength, but they'd also double the cost. That means it costs more for you to queue them up, and if you queue up multiple of them, it means more resources are tied up in queue. The result of this is basically you need to be a lot more linear and efficient with your production, because if you have too many units tied up in queue, that's resources that's not actually being spent on anything valuable, and it means you can be a lot less efficient than other civilizations, which is just going to put you behind for no good reason. The other part is sort of food more generally. I'm just going to age up with these 2 villas and make a mine with palace, and then we're going to go into wood. We want to just leave 5 on wood, 5 on food, so that 2 are going to go into wood, and we're going to rally on wood until 6. And then after 6, we're going to go back onto food. So the second pitfall I think is just how food dependent they are. They burn through food and they need a lot. So what happens is sometimes you can just lose a game because you run out of food and you just have less stuff in them, and you get rolled over, which just feels awful. This build, kind of, we're gonna counteract that in a couple ways. The first one is we're going to focus on archers, so they're more wood heavy rather than food. And the second is we're going to be aggressive in feudal age, which is going to allow us to go on the map to get food. So namely deer or even boar if you like. But that means we can get more food with a higher gather rate and do so more safely because it's behind our aggression, which makes it harder for our opponent to come and pressure us. We're going to get wheelbarrow here, and then when we age up is when we get broad axe. Those are our 2 upgrades that we're going to get in the early game. Or eco upgrades, I should say. And we're almost on 6 on wood here, so we're going to rally back to food. These 2, when they finish on mine work, are going to come back to sheep, although one is actually going to go make a stables right away. And then the third pitfall, finally getting to it, is... well, actually, it's arguably not a pitfall, but it's the struggle or the difficulty is just being able to judge whether you're going to win a fight or not as OOTD, because you have double the strength units but half value, and how that sort of interacts or with normal armies can feel quite strange, and you can, as a result, you can sort of not know sometimes whether you're going to win a fight. The upside of that, of course, is that your opponent doesn't know if they're going to win a fight either. So it can make things a little bit more hectic. But yeah, it could be a positive as well. Alright, so we're going to get double broadex as soon as that gold comes in. And then we're also going to make a house. And then when this is finished, we're going to make a horseman. So this should time out nicely. I make houses with the gold vills. You don't have to, but I do it because in this game... actually, we shouldn't have this many sheep in real life, should we? Let's have a couple. I do it because we don't use as much gold. Alright, so this should time out perfectly where you can get a horseman out as soon as this finishes, but you don't have to stop your villager production. And then when this comes out, we can go sort of harass with the scout and the horseman. If you don't have the APM for this, it's okay. But it is good to do it if you can. So once this comes out, we want to queue up a second horseman. And then we also want to make an archery range. So here we go, should finish up, and then we should get a bit of drop off. There comes the horseman, and then we should be able to also never stop build production here. Prove me right, prove me right. Lovely. And then once we get up to 12 on food, we're going to go back to wood. There's also a good time when the next gold comes in to get ranged defense, and we'll get ranged attack, which is going to help our horsemen. And then the ranged attack is of course going to help our archers. After the first horseman, also the second horseman is when we sort of make a little bit of a decision, and actually I'm going to pause about here to explain some of that. So with units, we're going to go for a comp of horseman and archer as the two really strong units that Order of the Dragon has available in the feudal age. Horsemen are basically like mini knights, and their archers are like longbows that can shoot really fast. So really good also against sort of the higher armor units than regular archers, and also they attack really fast, so if you take a straight up fight, the DPS is going to be relatively more higher. Higher. The downside there is if you're kiting back and forth in fights, the archers might not be as good because they're not firing effectively as much compared to normal ones. So that's where you sort of want to have a big army and be able to take a straight up fight as best you can. And horseman archer is probably the strongest comp that you can do that with. So that's why we're going for that in the feudal age. There's a caveat, and that's when you play against feudal knight civs, so like a French JD, Rus, Mongol, maybe something else I can't remember. But those civs can do builds where they only make knights. Normally they will go knight archer, especially in lower leagues, when someone's just sort of mindlessly following a build order. But if they do go mass knights only, you will have to make spearmen to counter it. They will run over your knights and your archers, your horsemen and your archers. So you do need to make spearmen to force them to make archers. And then if they are going knight archer, you can go horseman archer into that. The other thing I want to talk about briefly here is the macro cycle with Order of the Dragon. So like I talked about before with needing to be really efficient with our queues, I want to talk about how we can do that. And then like I talked about before about really struggling with food, how we're going to sort of counteract that to get our macro to support our unit production, to support our aggression. So first of all, you would have seen when we went up to feudal age, we got 2 eco upgrades really early. So wheelbarrow and broadaxe. With a lot of builds, it's not super important to get those. With this, or with the Order of the Dragon and a feudal aggression build, I think it really is important because you're really trying to squeeze every little bit of efficiency you can to have your resources go further. So in this case, that's why we get those so early. Especially the wheelbarrow helps across all resources, and the broadaxe helps with wood, which is going to really allow us to add in everything we're going to want to with archers, and then farms for food, and then even rams if we want to do a feudal all-in. We can also get the horticulture upgrade a little bit later, which is going to help us on sheep, berries, and farms. But it's not as important early, especially if we are going to go out onto deer early, because horticulture doesn't affect deer or boar. With the macro or the unit production cycle, we want to be very, very efficient and lean with making sure that we're not producing too much. So by the way, we're going to get rallying back on food, on wood there, now that we're on 12 on food. So being really, really lean in this production is making sure we only have one in the queue. You might have a second vill, because that's super important not to pause vill production. But across your units, you're going to want to just have one at most. Now you'll see we aren't able to produce constantly out of all three of these buildings, so we're going to want to prioritize a little bit. For the most part, you're going to want to prioritize archers because they're going to be our main DPS. The horsemen are there as, first of all, as raiding, and then second of all, they're going to be our, when we fight straight up, they're going to be our front line, trying to get onto their back line and really dealing out the hurt to their archers. But it's our archers which are going to be the main constant source of DPS. So we're going to try to prioritize them first, and this is where our wood production is going to start ramping up. And then when we have extra money, we can put in a horseman or two. At this point, you can see we're going to start getting low on this food. Most of these guys can go onto berries, that's fine, but we're actually going to take 5 to go onto deer. The reason we take 5 is because that's how many can fit in an outpost. So if we are worried about being attacked, we can get them to build an outpost as well. And then we don't have to, we can just garrison and ungarrison. We don't have to run them back, which is what the thing that we're trying to avoid, because we are trying to maximize our food economy so we can make as many units as possible and go kill the guy. So we'll see our wood economy really starting to ramp up now, which is great. Just keep adding in everything. Houses, archers, horsemen when we can. Here's a good time to get another one. And then when this runs out, we're going to go into berries. That's fine. But it's going to really start ramping up. The other thing we can do is we can refresh our lumber camps as the space becomes available, which does make it more efficient and it's worth doing. As a new player, don't stress it too much. But if there's a huge gap, it makes a big difference if you can do that. And like I said with Order of the Dragon, we're really trying to squeeze out as much as we can. So that's where, that's another area where you can sort of get that extra little bit of worth, extra little bit of value. So at this point, there's really not too much to talk about with the build. It's really a decision point here of whether they're going to want to feud all in or whether they want to go up to castle. So I'll just take a sec or pause the game to speak about that. So basically we have two options. We can go all in with feudal aggression. In that case, we're going to want to get siege engineering from the Minework Palace. So we can make rams with our archers. To do that, we should have the gold for it, but we're going to need to pause our unit production, especially our archer production, so that we get enough wood to make rams. One sort of roughly good rule of thumb is to make 3 rams, give or take, before you make the push. Sometimes you feel like you might want to go on with less. Sometimes you might feel you need more, whatever. But 3 is a good rule of thumb. And then go for the kill that way. So with your horsemen and a heck ton of archers, go end the game there. There's a bit of a variant to that. If feudal age goes really long, you might want to add, well, first of all, you can add an extra archery range if your wood's really piling up and you've got more than you can produce archers out of one archery range. Or you can go barracks, and if you've got, you can spend that extra wood on farms and turn that wood essentially into food, which you can then use to make feudal age men at arms, which the gilded men at arms are quite strong. Not super useful in early feudal age, but later on they can just be a huge tank, which allows our archers to be the huge DPS machines they are. So that's another option, but ultimately you're trying to do a big feudal all-in push. Second option is to go castle age. So to do that, you're going to want to stop making units entirely and put a couple extra villages onto gold so that you can sort of time out your resources. So you're going to get to 1200 food, 600 gold, roughly around the same time, and then you're going to age up with the Burgrave Palace. Once you're up to castle age, you're going to upgrade existing units if you have a huge mass of them. So if you have a heaps of archers, upgrade your archers. If you've got 2 archers, don't bother. And then you're going to overwhelm your opponent with your upgraded units and also with your gilded men at arms coming out of the Burgrave. So they're going to be cheaper and they're going to produce more quickly. And you do that combined with ranged armor +2 and also the golden curious upgrade, which makes them a bit tankier as well, from the Minework Palace, a unique upgrade out of the Minework Palace, which means you can then go in the game in early Castle Age with the Gilded Men at Arms. So that's kind of it for decisions, but they're both quite good ideas, quite strong. The Feudal All-In, I think, is easier and just sort of gives you a nice win or lose type of game. Castle is a little bit more difficult as it introduces a little bit more variability or uncertainty as to how the game's going to play out and what your opponent's going to be able to react with, as they're going to get a little bit more time before you're sort of all in. But I suggest playing around with both. Cool. That's basically the build, so I'm not going to worry too much about like any of the macro stuff now, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the more general stuff with Order of the Dragon and the game more generally. So first of all is unit control. With Order of the Dragon, you have fewer units, right? I suggest, because you have fewer units, that you really do try to make the most of using hotkeys and microing your army. Put them in 2 control groups. All the archers in one, and all your horsemen and the scout in another. If you're really onto it, you can have your scout separate, but I would suggest for a new player, don't worry too much. And then fighting using the 2 control groups. With your archers, you can put them in line formation with Z or Z, depending on how you're so inclined. But either is fine. Your archers do a lot of damage, and they attack really fast. So one of the things that's we can just like kite and A move back as we go. Another thing we sort of want to do is we could even focus fire. So I could be like, oh, maybe that's a men arms in the front and I really want to kill the spearman in the back. Let's right click the spearman. That type of thing, to make sure that we are killing with each shot. Because these guys do so much damage, you really can, even against strong units, you can sort of off in 1 or 2 shot, which can be more effective than just sprinkling your damage across a lot of units. The main thing I'm trying to get across here is that you've got the choice, because you are controlling fewer units. It should be easier for you to control it. But that's really all there is to worry about with them. Likewise, with the horsemen, you really want to make sure that you control them so they're not dying onto spears. They're really strong and really tanky, but it does mean if you lose one, it's even more. It's super impactful. So you want to make sure that you're not getting them caught out, or you're not looking, or whatever, and you end up losing a bunch of spearmen, a bunch of horsemen, in a couple seconds to a bunch of spearmen, as it will be more impactful than if they weren't double the value. I want to talk just sort of very briefly about some of the focus areas. So one of the things with Order of the Dragon being a bit simpler is it does create more room for you to focus on embedding some of those good habits. Now, I do have a separate video on like settings, hotkeys, and habits, and how to sort of set up, try to play the game the right way. I'll put it up on the screen. And there'll be a playlist link, at least in the description, that you can go find it. But because of simpler, you can sort of focus more on these things without getting so overwhelmed. Maybe not without getting overwhelmed, but with getting overwhelmed less. So I really do emphasize, I think it's good to focus on using hotkeys rather than clicking with your mouse where you can, especially for things like making buildings or queuing up units. Using control groups, like I just said, with 1 and 2 for your army, and then making sure you're also using your control group hotkeys when you want to use your production or your TC or what have you. Using shift queuing, there should be one that sort of just comes naturally anyway. If your villager goes and builds a house, but then you shift queue them back to the resource. Making sure that you're always going back and looking at your TC and your production to make sure you're making villages and making units, but you're not making too many to have too much in the queue and tying up those resources. Always making sure you're peeking at your mini map, so you're not getting caught out. making sure that you look at your resources to make sure that you're spending them, that you are not floating too much, you've got the right amount of production, you've got the right villager split, and if you need to add more production, you can do so. If you could look to age up, you can do so, because any money that you're not spending or any money that's wasted queued up in buildings which aren't actually producing those units is money wasted that could be going somewhere else. That simplicity, the other thing it means is not only can you focus on those good habits, but it does mean you can be a little bit more, or being aggressive might be a bit easier to control this army compared to a bigger army, which means it should free you up a little bit to focus more on the macro side of it and getting your economy right and doing all those things I just said, rather than worrying about trying to control all these small groups of units out of a bigger group of units. So in that sense, I think Order of the Dragon is quite good for helping learn some of those fundamentals. The other thing I just want to stress as a bit of a conclusion is, and with this build in particular, is just focus on executing your own thing. I've included a little bit of a variant there with regards to whether and when you want to add in spearmen, but other than that, you're kind of doing the same thing every game. Really focus on that before worrying about your opponent. It is good to scout your opponent and see what they're up to and try to react. In this case, because we're taking the game to the opponent, we're trying to make them react instead. So just focus on executing as best you can, and you'll find that you end up climbing quite quickly by doing what you do really well, rather than trying to get good at reacting and countering to what your opponent's doing. Ultimately, up until probably like early Conqueror, to be honest, macro is still king for improving. We can have more shit than our opponent by killing him or killing more than he kills of us. That's great. But we can also have more shit than him just by making more and being more efficient and better with our resources. And that'll help us climb faster and give us a better foundation to improve, and also to learn other civs as well once we get to that point. So that would be my recommendation of sort of what to focus on and what to do. But other than that, I think that's about it for Order of the Dragon. If there's anything I've sort of missed or you have any questions, let me know. If there's any other sort of civs or videos you want me to cover, let me know. But for now, that's Order of the Dragon. I hope you enjoy, and I hope to see you in another one. Cheers. Bye-bye.